Hello there, welcome to Planet America. I'm John Barry.
And I'm Chaz Lachadello.
This week, one Trump trial gets stormy while another may have cleared away entirely.
And we have an update on Cricketgate. But first...
Stephanie Clifford, better known as adult film performer Stormy Daniels, has testified in former President Donald Trump's New York hush money trial.
She testified that it was her publicist who told her it would be good for her career to have dinner with Donald Trump. During his 2016 run for president, Trump's then attorney and personal fixer, Michael Cohen, paid Daniels $130,000 to keep quiet about a sexual encounter with Trump that took place in 2006.
And now prosecutors allege that Trump's repayment of Cohen was covered up by fraudulent accounts and that those original payments were an illegal campaign contribution. On the witness stand, Stormy Daniels testified she had sex with Mr. Trump, a claim he denies, and her often explicit testimony prompted lawyers for Mr. Trump to seek a mistrial, although the judge denied that request. Trump's lawyer, Susan Nashel, began by asking Daniels whether she hates President Trump. She said yes. Nashel then used her cross-examination of Daniels to try and paint her as a gold digger, accusing her of trying to extort money from Trump. Daniels said that accusation was false. Trump himself sat just metres away from Stormy Daniels as she testified. Court reporters say that he was sometimes shaking his head and at one point appeared to mouth an expletive, the exact nature of which was not included in reports. Judge Merchan certainly heard something telling Trump's lawyer, Todd Blanche, that he could hear Trump cursing audibly and shaking his head, which he said was contemptuous. And on Truth Social, Trump showed even greater contempt.
The prosecution, which has no case, has gone too far. Mistrial.
And Trump might have more to vent about soon, John, because after finding Trump guilty of violating his gag order for the 10th time yesterday, Judge Merchan held that it's apparent that monetary fines have not and will not suffice to deter Trump from violating the court's orders. And he put Trump on notice that, if appropriate and warranted, future violations of the court's lawful orders will be punishable by incarceration. Now, there's an awful lot of trial time left to be saying things like, next time you break an order, you're going to jail. So you can expect that to be coming to a head soon, I suspect. John. Less spectacular than jail threats and Stormy Daniels' testimony, though, but possibly more important, were the handwritten notes revealed in yesterday's hearing. They were written by former corporate controller at Trump Org, Jeff McConney, and they detail the actual payments to Michael Cohen. We're talking a $130,000 wire transfer for the Stormy payment, plus $50,000 for text services, plus a bonus of $60,000. That was all then grossed up 50% for income taxes to equal $360,000 in their own handwriting. Now, depending on what those tech services were, that might put the lie to Trump declaring those payments legal services like he did. And that is the fraud that the prosecution need to prove. Throw in the 2018 civil suit deposition where Michael Cohen and Trump both affirmed that Trump deliberately reimbursed Cohen for the $130,000, and the prosecution's case is coming together. By contrast, the defence would probably be more interested in something that Trump's ex-assistant Hope Hicks said last week. She said when rumours of a Stormy Daniels affair leaked a few days before the election, Trump was concerned how it would be viewed by his wife, Melania. And he wanted Hope Hicks to make sure that the newspapers weren't delivered to his house that morning, trying to keep him away from her. Remember, if concerns about Melania hearing the story influenced Stormy's hush money payments at all, then Trump's not guilty. Those payments have to be 100% for campaign purposes, to be a campaign expense. So that testimony was potentially useful for Trump's defense. However, when asked if they talked about how the Stormy Daniels leaks would affect the campaign, Hicks said at that stage, everything they talked about was about whether there'd been impact on the campaign. It was just before the election. And she was almost certain he would have asked her, how is it playing? So look, it's hard to mind read the jury how they're going to take all that, John, but the Melania defence, to me, is probably Trump's strongest card to play.
if the jury buys it. Meanwhile, in better news for Donald Trump, the judge presiding over his alleged illegal retention of documents case has postponed that case indefinitely. It was originally scheduled to start later this month, but Judge Aileen Cannon, a Trump appointee, has issued an updated list of pre-trial deadlines and hearings today, which now stretches into July, with no date set to begin the trial itself. Concluding, the court also determines that finalisation of a trial date at this juncture would be imprudent. In other words, it is now unlikely this case will be concluded before November's presidential election.
Yeah, look, this trial was never happening before the election, but Judge Cannon, she's really made sure of it.
Oh, that she has. In other news this week, after weeks of pro-Palestinian campus protests and pro-Israel counter-demonstrations, President Biden has bowed to growing pressure to address the issue, with remarks delivered live from the White House.
Violent protest is not protected. Peaceful protest is. It's against the law when violence occurs. Destroying property is not a peaceful protest. It's against the law.
And President Biden followed that up with a speech today marking Holocaust Remembrance Day, addressing anti-Semitism in the wake of last October's attack on Israel by Hamas.
This ancient hatred of Jews didn't begin with the Holocaust. It didn't end with the Holocaust either. This hatred continues to lie deep in the hearts of too many people in the world.
Meanwhile, President Biden is trying to tread a very fine line diplomatically and politically. Publicly, the Biden administration has continued to support Israel's right to self-defence, while privately pressuring them not to attack the city of Rafah and to agree to a ceasefire.
And just in case that message isn't getting through, he's also quietly put a hold on a shipment of American ammunition to Israel. That's the first time since October 7 that Biden stopped a weapons shipment of any kind. So that might get Netanyahu's attention.
It would certainly seem so. President Biden has certainly paid a political price at home, with flagging support from younger voters and Muslim Americans turning away from supporting him as these protests have continued across the United States this week.
Columbia University announced it's cancelling its university-wide commencement ceremony after weeks of pro-Palestinian protests on campus.
And that decision may have had something to do with the disruption of the commencement ceremony at the University of Michigan by pro-Palestine demonstrators this week. Demonstrators also descended on New York's Metropolitan Museum of Art during the Met Gala, for a time even blocking access to the red carpet.
Yeah, look, Biden had to say something about these protests. He was conspicuous in his silence for the first 2 weeks, and that wasn't stopping Republicans making him own the protests anyway.
I understand their passion. They have a point.
I've heard gas the Jews.
I don't resent his passion. I also condemn those who don't understand what's going on with the Palestinians. I understand their passion.
Well, that was loud. I did, though, want to issue a word of caution when it comes to these protests. They're not always easy to get a handle on. Let's take as a case study the uni with, I think, the most violence over the last few weeks. That's UCLA. About 2 weeks ago, the protesters set up an encampment in the quad outside Royce Hall. And it's fair to say they didn't exactly look after it. This is the front of Royce Hall today. Now, that's not great. I wouldn't call it top shelf behaviour from the protesters, but while they did hold Royce Quad, the protesters sealed off the area and put up checkpoints. They only let in other protesters, and they gave those protesters wristbands for ID, stopping other people from getting in, as you can see. Now, they're obviously not allowed to do that. It's a public university. The uni should have stopped them, but the uni did not stop them. And then the protesters put up plywood fences to protect the encampment further. Now, by this stage, there were counter-protesters as well, and those counter-protesters were very keen to get into that camp. And that led to this video when a counter-protester acted like he was trying to get past a checkpoint.
We're going this way. You guys have closed the entrance. We are UCLA students. I have my ID right here. I'm being blocked off, not by the security guard, but by you two. You three. Oh, look, they're making their burger while I'm going this way. Excuse me. This is what they do.
So, to be clear, that wasn't just any student. That was Eli Sivis. He's a wannabe actor.
You decided it for him. Now, come on.
The mother's waiting.
You're sick!
I know.
What a gripping performance. Look, I don't know if he actually had a class to go to, but he clearly could have got through at the beginning if he'd wanted to. Everyone knew what Eli was doing, including the security guard there. He was trying to make a nice viral video. And fair enough, if these protesters are going to put up checkpoints, they should expect to cop some crap online. But this is how that same video was covered on CNN.
Making Jewish students feel unsafe at their own schools is unacceptable, and it is happening way too much right now.
I'm a UCLA student. I deserve to go here. We pay tuition. This is our school, and they're not letting me walk in. My class is over there. I want to use that entrance. Well, I can't take it. Will you let me go in? This can be over in a second. Just let me and my friends go in.
Again, what you just saw is 2024 in Los Angeles, harkening back to the 1930s in Europe, and I do not say that lightly.
Europe in the 30s? Now, you might be wondering why the protesters even wanted the checkpoints. Look, I don't know, I can't read their mind, but maybe their logic became clearer when the counter-protesters returned with their mates and attacked the encampment.
Pro-Israel counter-protesters attacked the encampment with fireworks, metal rods, and tear gas for hours late Tuesday night and into early Wednesday morning. At least 15 people were injured.
According to the New York Times, the counter-protesters attacked the protesters for several hours, beating them with sticks, using chemical sprays and launching fireworks at them, and they kept at it for nearly 3 hours until the police arrived. Even then, it took the cops another few hours to intervene in the fighting. Then the next day, old mate Eli was back, this time carrying pepper spray.
You see the pepper spray? So make it clear. Make it clear we are peacefully protesting here.
I'm not hurting you.
Peacefully protesting. None of these students are armed the way you are.
And then that night, the police dealt with the camp once and for all in a fairly unsubtle way. Now, why did I tell you all this? I'm not trying to pick one side over another here. I think there is plenty of blame to go around, but there is a lot of nuance in this story that you just wouldn't know from one 10-second viral clip on cable news. And there are 100 protests where this one came from. They're all across America. So every single uni is different, so don't get sucked into a narrative.
Good advice. Joe Biden, for now, has the support of progressive icon Senator Bernie Sanders, though. And Bernie, at 82, announced that he's going to be running for re-election to another 6-year term in November. But Bernie has also delivered a warning to his fellow octogenarian.
I am thinking back, and other people are making this reference, that this may be Biden's Vietnam. Lyndon Johnson, in many respects, was a very, very good president. Domestically, brought forth some major pieces of legislation. He chose not to run in '68 because of opposition to his views on Vietnam. And I worry very much that President Biden is putting himself in a position where he has alienated not just young people, but a lot of the Democratic base in terms of his views on Israel and this war.
An unpopular Democratic president running for re-election during a time of war and protests on college campuses. A rival candidate campaigning on law and order accused of pandering to racism. You can see why there are a lot of comparisons being made right now between 2024 and 1968. And there are plenty of similarities. There's even another Kennedy running for president. And like 1968, Democrats will be holding their convention in Chicago this year. But they hope that history does not repeat itself completely.
I shall not seek.
56 years ago, President Lyndon Johnson decided not to seek another term. His main rival, Robert F. Kennedy, running against American involvement in the Vietnam War, was shot and killed during the campaign.
The senator was hit by 2 bullets. 5 other persons were also wounded as bullets sprayed the kitchen.
That cleared the way for Johnson's Vice President, Hubert Humphrey, to become the Democratic presidential nominee.
I ask your help for our America, and I ask you to help me in this difficult campaign that lies ahead.
But, like Johnson, Hubert Humphrey supported America's commitment to defend South Vietnam. And progressive anti-war Democrats who'd supported Kennedy, or others like Eugene McCarthy, took to the streets of Chicago during the Democratic Convention to voice their opposition. So, not unlike today, in 1968, the Democratic Party was deeply divided between a progressive anti-war faction and the political establishment, which still offered tepid backing to a war effort. The powerful mayor of Chicago back then, Democrat Richard Daley, ordered police to get tough on the protesters, but instead, the police themselves rioted, brutally attacking demonstrators they saw as a bunch of peaceniks and hippies. Watching that violence and chaos unfold on their TV screens, middle Americans gravitated towards the candidate who promised to restore peace at home and abroad, Richard Nixon. He went on to narrowly defeat Hubert Humphrey that November. Clearly, Donald Trump wants to emulate Richard Nixon this year. But there are some important differences. American soldiers are not fighting and dying in Gaza or Ukraine. While racial tensions persist, 2024 is really nothing like the tinderbox of the civil rights era, inflamed by the desegregation of schools and suburbs and the murder of leaders like Malcolm X and Martin Luther King. But, like Lyndon Johnson and Hubert Humphrey before him, President Joe Biden needs the support of young voters and an anxious middle America in order to win. Well, for more, we're joined by Dr Larry Sabato. He's Director of the Centre for Politics at the University of Virginia and author of books including The Kennedy Half Century. Larry Sabato, welcome back to Planet America.
Thank you. Glad to be back.
So, Larry, what do you make of these comparisons we're hearing at the moment between 1968 and 2024 and the suggestions from the likes of Bernie Sanders that Gaza could become Joe Biden's Vietnam?
No, and I lived through both of those campaigns, was actually a bit active. I was in Chicago, the site of the Democratic Convention, right before the convention began, and it was already an armed camp thanks to Mayor Richard J. Daley of Chicago. But this year is a pale shadow of 1968, at least so far. You never know what's going to develop, and ironically, the Democrats have set their convention in late August for Chicago. It was late August in Chicago in 1968. But I don't think the similarities are as strong, certainly, as Bernie Sanders suggested. That was overheated.
Well, first of all, hats off to you, Larry, for showing up to Chicago 1968 when you were 16 years old. That is admirable nerdery on your part.
I lied about my age. That's how I got into everything.
But yeah, as far as polling goes, how do the American people feel about these college protests? Do they think that the protests have gone too far? Do they think that the police might have overreacted? What's the vibe at the moment?
Well, it depends on which side you're on. You know, if you support Israel and you think that the United States should maintain that alliance, obviously you're not happy about the kinds of demonstrations you're seeing from the pro-Palestinian side. If you, however, are in between or feel badly about both sides or are pro-Palestinian, you're very unhappy about it. And young people are much more likely to be pro-Palestinian. There is a real age gap, a credibility gap that we see emerging in the polls.
And in your view, Larry, will Trump and the Republicans be able to take a page out of Richard Nixon's 1968 playbook and run a law and order campaign off the back of these protests?
Oh, definitely. Well, they're following two playbooks. Remember, their strongest support is among evangelical Christians. Trump, despite his very loose private life over the years, got 83% of the votes of evangelical Christians in 2020. Maybe some of the current business in the Manhattan trial will have an effect on that. But they are pro-evangelical Christian, and as you know, a fundamental belief among evangelical Christians is that the second coming will happen there in Israel and the Middle East. And the other factor that they pay close attention to is that older Americans are especially susceptible to the use of the law and order issue. And you're so right to bring that up. As I say, I'm old enough to remember all the commercials from Nixon and the Republicans in '68 about restoring law and order. And we're going to be the ones to do it. The Democrats can't, and that's why the cities are in the mess they're in. We're going to see some of the same ads this fall. You can predict it pretty clearly already.
Now, you said that these protests are only a faint echo of 1968, but if the news hypes them up enough and if there are enough negative ads about them, do you think they can impact Biden's fortunes anyway?
Well, they could. I don't think many young people are going to end up voting for Donald Trump. I don't care what spring polls say. But they could get discouraged and not vote. Biden won them by 30+ percentage points in 2020. He can't afford to have young people not turn out. Also, young people are being disproportionately attracted to the third-party candidates like RFK Jr. Those votes come from both sides, but I think in the end they will come mainly from Biden. So it's non-voting and voting for third-party candidates, not voting for Trump among young people, that will cost Biden.
Dr Larry Sabato, always great to get your insights. Thank you for being with us on Planet America.
Always enjoy it. Thank you.
South Dakota Governor and Republican Vice Presidential wannabe Kristi Noem's autobiography is out this week. It's called No Going Back, but she might quite like to go back and do some rewrites. Last week we reported on the outcry over Noem's decision to shoot her family dog, a 14-month-old German wire-haired pointer named Cricket, because Nome says it wasn't a good hunting dog and it attacked some neighbours' chickens. Well, this week, as she's out and about trying to promote the book and salvage her vice presidential hopes in the process, she's facing a lot of awkward questions about that.
This was a dangerous animal that was killing livestock and attacking people.
Nome writes that Cricket tried to bite her, but didn't actually do it. Still, she shot it anyway, and now Nome is defending another animal shooting, that of a billy goat, which met its grisly end in the same gravel pit moments after Cricket.
How do you justify that? How was the goat a threat? And I'm asking you this because it seems like you're celebrating the killing of the animals.
And what is Nome's justification?
These animals were attacking my children, that we live on a farm and a ranch, and that tough decisions are made many times, and it is to protect people.
Fine, but my question is, if Nome shot the dog to protect people, then why didn't she have the dog on a leash? Because according to her book, when she stopped to talk to a local family, Cricket escaped Noem's truck, and that's how she attacked the family's chickens. But dogs in harnesses on leashes can't escape trucks, can they? Also, about that goat, it's worth playing the first part of that last question you just played, because an essential part of her story about killing the dog and the goat is the name of the book chapter that story appeared in. I think it's quite revealing of her state of mind.
Because you put it in a part of a chapter called Bad Day to Be a Goat.
Does that sound like she took it seriously, John?
No, it's a bad day to be a goat killer, it seems. Margaret Brennan on CBS's Face the Nation also asked some pretty pointed questions about Nome's claim to have met with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un.
You talk about meeting some world leaders, and one specific one, quote, "I remember when I met with North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un, I'm sure he underestimated me, having no clue about my experience staring down little tyrants. I've been a children's pastor after all."
So the book clearly says she met Kim. But did she?
Well, you know, as soon as this was brought to my attention, I certainly made some changes and looked at this passage, and I've met with many, many world leaders. I've traveled around the world. As soon as it was brought to my attention, we went forward and have made some edits.
Huh? So the claim is now being edited out, presumably for future print runs if required. Is that because it was some mistake, maybe made by a ghostwriter? Or is it top secret? Or is it just a lie?
I'm not going to talk about my specific meetings with world leaders. I'm just not going to do that. This anecdote shouldn't have been in the book, and as soon as it was brought to my attention, I made sure that that was adjusted.
As soon as it was brought to her attention, of course. Now, does that mean after she narrated her own audiobook 6 weeks ago? That's only one more question that Noem has struggled with on her book tour from hell, even at Fox News.
Still think that you are in line to be Trump's vice president?
No, it's up to Donald Trump. He's the only person who will decide this. He's the only person who will decide. And yes, I do speak to him.
May I ask what he said to you about being vice president?
I never tell anybody my personal conversations with
Did the dog story
President
come up
Trump.
in your conversation with
Trump? I talk to President Trump all the time.
About the dog?
About a lot of things, and tough he is, and how well he is doing.
Did you bring up the dog?
Yes, enough,
with Trump?
Stuart.
With Trump? Did you
this
bring
interview
up the dog
is
with Trump?
ridiculous, what you were doing right now.
I don't
so
think
you
so.
need to stop. It is.
Okay.
It is.
We'll
Let's
stop.
talk about some real topics that Americans care about.
I'm afraid we're out of time.
Oh, well, of course we are.
Christy, for you, there is no other topic.
I think Stuart Varney just got the same look cricket did in those final moments. But look, the real kicker in all of this is that Kristi Noem is now gunning for Joe Biden's dog, Commander, that German Shepherd who did actually bite a number of people when he lived at the White House. She said that Commander should meet cricket, i.e. Commander should meet the same fate as cricket.
Well, number one, Joe Biden's dog has attacked 24 Secret Service people. So how many people is enough people to be attacked and dangerously hurt before you make a decision on a dog and what to do with it?
Well, he's not living at the White House
That's
anymore.
the question that the president should be held accountable to.
You're saying he should be
That's
shot?
what the president should be accountable to, is what is the number?
But far from all of this being disqualifying for the vice presidency, Kristi Noem was at a fundraiser at Mar-a-Lago on the weekend alongside a cattle call of potential running mates for Donald Trump. And according to private audio leaked to the Axios website, Trump said of Noem that she is somebody that he, quote, loves and has been a supporter of her for a long time. So we may not have heard the last of Kristi Noem or cricket, Chaz.
Maybe not, John, even though it is Republicans in particular who like dogs a lot, at least according to a 2016 YouGov poll. There is one group of people, though, who would be less likely to be disturbed by the dog shooting story than most. And apparently last year, Kristi Noem pitched herself to those people to be the new head of the National Rifle Association.
Perfect.
So that could work out quite well for Kristi. If anything, she's overqualified. But before we go, I do want to show you an interesting poll this week from ABC, showing that's ABC America, showing how partisans can manipulate poll results to suit themselves. ABC found Trump leading by 46 to 44 amongst all adults. But amongst registered adults, Biden is leading 46 to 45. And amongst likely voters, Biden is winning 49 to 45. Now, you can expect to see this all year long because Trump does well amongst unlikely voters and Biden does well amongst likely voters. And the partisan media outlets are choosing which part of the poll they want to report. Also, Biden is just ahead in swing states. But other than that, ABC is reinforcing all the trends of the year. Trump is winning amongst 18 and 29s by 5. Biden is winning amongst seniors by 6. Hispanics are super close with Biden just ahead. And Trump is strongly favoured by RFK supporters, which would suggest RFK is taking votes from Trump for now. But given all that, and especially with Biden being ahead by 4 points amongst likely voters, you might be surprised to hear that in that same poll, Biden has an approval rating of only 35%, with 81% of people saying he's too old for another term. It's almost like favourability numbers just don't matter at all anymore, and maybe they don't. After all, there is one historical figure that we often forget, and that is Harry Truman, who in April 1948 had an approval rating of 36%, and he still just scraped home. Wow, I suppose Truman at least used the bomb. This administration has never used a bomb that big. Although Mark Hamill bombed pretty hard last week.
You know, I called him Mr. President. He said, "You can call me Joe." And I said, "Can I call you Joe B-1 Kenobi?"
Luke, these are not the jokes you're looking for.
And that's it from Planet America. We'll be back with a fireside chat on Friday night at 8 p.m. Eastern on ABC News.
And we'll be back here at the same time next week, 10 p.m. on ABC TV, 9 p.m. on iView, and whenever you like on Facebook or YouTube. See you later.
Bye-bye.